The results are still smoldering out in the sands of Syria, Iraq, Gaza, Iran. So I honestly don't understand how we can how America can ever reassert itself. The foundation of Trumpism has ushered in an era of transactionalism. His policy is through unpredictability, something you do in business, something you do in war. But long term diplomacy is on predictability, not on unpredictability. He's put maximum pressure on Iran and support without conditions for Israel. He abandoned the Kurds. He's using the Twitter handle. He's reshuffling the norms without building new ones. Some of the major regional decisions and some of their implications, if you think. Look at the Abraham Accords. UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, they normalized their relationships with Israel. Where do they stand now? These countries went out on a limb and stretched out their neck.
Watch Federal Post. Bold and independent.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. This is Hasan Zafar with Talking Politics. We are going to talk about the credibility of United States foreign policy diplomacy. That's the main question for today that we are raising with Sabahat Rafique Sahiba. Thank you very much, madam, for joining. A very quick introduction for our audience. Sabahat Sahiba had legal studies in Duke University. She has been an investment banker, a successful businesswoman, and the rest of her story I would like her to tell herself. Thank you very much for joining.
Please, thank you for having me, doctor. मेरा तारुफ तो खैर बहुत ही मुख्तसर सा है. I am by profession a venture capitalist, and I used to be an Islamic banker when I worked in Pakistan. Then I went to the US and I became engaged in the venture capitalist activity. And my specialization used to be in private placements, something that I still continue to do. Most of my investments have been in the technology space. We were based out of California, so by definition, our investments were centered around the tech world in the Silicon Valley. And after that, since September 11, 2001, we became engaged, and Muslims in America became politically active. And I started working in the nonprofit domain, primarily in education and political activism for civil liberties for the Muslim population. I also became a congressional delegate, primarily for the purpose of forming Muslim caucuses, Pakistani Muslim caucuses, both in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And we built alliances to gain a voice. And alhamdulillah, that went well. I was also involved in a lot of interfaith activities and was part of United Religions Initiative, and I was on the President's Council for that. Since I've come back to Pakistan, I've been mostly in the education space, trying to our first nonprofit was engaged in AI-based educational interventions. And so that is my brief background. Otherwise, I can go on forever because one feels we're doing something good.
I wanted you to share.
In reality, all of us are very humble.
Because you have a very good understanding of how the US system works, and you have seen the US foreign policy changing, evolving after 9/11. The narrative about war on terror and the kind of wars US has been engaged with, especially in the Middle East region, and the US intervention in Afghanistan and the long engagement thereafter. So we have witnessed all these things. But what is really drawing my attention to the US policy in this moment is the way in which the credibility of US diplomacy has been damaged, especially after Iran and Israel conflict started, and they sat down at the negotiating table. And while the talks were underway, Israel attacked, and it happened twice. And we also have history with Pakistan because we have been dependent on the US weaponry, but from time to time, we have also experienced that they have used these weapons and other institutions like IMF and the World Bank as a leverage. So being close to the United States has been quite challenging, to put it safely, has been challenging for Pakistan. How do you see, let's start with the recent things, the way the US credibility has been, tarnished, if not undermined. Yes.
So I would say both words are correct, tarnished and undermined, and we see a long-term strategic damage to it. And most of the damage, while the previous presidents have not done any better, but definitely during the current presidency and the previous presidency of President Trump, we feel that there may be a lasting legacy, because he is a very volatile person. And the specific region that you're alluding to, the Middle East, that's an equally volatile region. So I'll try to say that it's not a partisan analysis, but more of a philosophical inquiry. Because after this presidency, the nature of power, the frailty of alliances, and the long arc of American diplomacy is permanently changed. Because when superpowers, they start acting like disruptors, and I use that word very responsibly, America has now become a disruptor. So then what becomes of credibility when consistency gives way to tweets? And can strategic realignment be called a genius when its results are still smoldering? You see, everything has moved into the tactical domain, and the results are still smoldering out in the sands of Syria, Iraq, Gaza, Iran. So I honestly don't understand how we can how America can ever reassert itself. The foundation of Trumpism has ushered in an era of transactionalism over tradition. He's abandoned the post-World War II liberal internationalism for a hard-edged transactional realism.
So this insistence on transactionalism has caused this problem. Do you think that this is the primary problem in their dealing with the world? Because over insistence on transactional relationship with everyone.
It's a part of it. Allies are not assets. Previously, alliances were built on ideologies, on confluence of thoughts, confluence of whatever your worldview was. One doesn't have to subscribe to it or agree with it, but at least the alliances were built on values. They were not built on asset values. And, whether that was NATO, whether that was the Gulf monarchies, now NATO, Gulf monarchies, Israel, they're all appraised like business ventures. So to me, that is, and to the world and history, to history, while economics is an important part, alliances and our worldview cannot be myopic, because businesses can meander through here and there, and things come and go, and things change over the lives of a nation. So if you start focusing on short-term business goals or business deals, then it's not going to go anywhere. The second part of it is that under Trumpism, disruption has become a doctrine. And the role of a singular superpower.
Condoleezza
disruption
Rice,
is policy through.
Sorry, just something came to mind. I thought it is important to share with you. I heard the former Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, using this word, disruptive power, for Russia. It was a few years ago that we created a world order, and Russia has emerged as a disruptive power, and it is destroying that system that we developed, that we invested so much time and energy in building. So now, when China is emerging as an economic power, so is that why you are using you are looking at the United States as a disruptive power itself, which it accused Russia of some time ago?
Sir, it's not an accusation. I can start going through the policies that we've been following to substantiate the claim that we have become a disruptive power. And maybe, and that's just an aside. If you look at Donald Trump, as a person, he has always been very inspired by the Russians. He's always looked up to Putin. He's always looked up to Russia, even when Putin was not in existence. You look at his history, he's always he's tried to pick Russian wives. So that cowboy image of that raw power, raw masculinity, somehow that is embedded in his psyche. So maybe subconsciously he's emulating Russia to start using disruption as a doctrine and start, his policy is through unpredictability, something you do in business, something you do in war. But long term diplomacy is on predictability, not on unpredictability. He's put maximum pressure on Iran and support without conditions for Israel. He abandoned the Kurds. He's using the Twitter handle. He's reshuffling the norms without building new ones. So I don't mind. I mean, if the world is evolving and the way we communicate with the world with alliances, it's okay to create new norms. The world is not static. Power is not static. But you cannot be unpredictable, and we cannot start disrupting without building new ones or having a strategic thought in your mind. There is a decline in institutional diplomacy. You look at the number of resignations and hollowing of the State Department. He seems to somehow prefer personal relationships over institutions, whether that is a relationship with Netanyahu, with MBS, with Erdogan. Even at one time, he claims, so you will always hear him in television interviews, oh, I was on call with so and so, because he's always trying to establish a personal connection. As the head of the most powerful country in the world, we don't have the luxury of playing these games. Again, these are not short term business deals, these are long term international relations. And America had invested in these relationships and in these alliances over a very long time. You cannot be playing by the whim. And I mean, just to look at some of the decisions that were made in his time, and I've actually made a list. I'll actually try to refer to some of them.
Share everything that you have.
So there are some of the major regional decisions and some of their implications, if you think. Look at the Abraham Accords. UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, they normalized their relationships with Israel. Where do they stand now? These countries went out on a limb and stretched out their neck. These are nations which will all face a huge backlash on the street after this, because so see my point that you cannot create stability out of disruption or shooting from the hip or first saying something and then doing another. He's basically been engaging in short-term diplomatic coups because he wants news, he wants headlines, and long-term, in particular, when you look at the Iran-Israel conflict, the short-term diplomatic coup has bypassed the Palestinian statehood question altogether. You cannot do that. These are problems that have a long history. And all they're trying to do is create data points because he wants to claim, oh, I did 4 peace deals in 4 months. No comparable, whatever. So he just likes these headlines. Again, communicating through Twitter, writing it here, writing it there, and quoting numbers which actually have no bearing on history in the long run. History is written over hundreds of years. Nations are built over hundreds of years. These short-term data points have created a disruption, have created a lack of credibility for American America as a nation. Technically, I don't think that these 4 peace deals in 4 months have created any progress. I don't think there has been any progress in Israel and Palestine since Camp David, which was way back in 1978. By 2025, the normalization that had continued, that Biden tried to bring in, it remained cold at a public level because Gaza conflict is so heart-wrenching. Any Arab nation that ever had a hope of trying to normalize relationships with Israel, which was one of the policy goals under Abraham Accords, is now dead. Nobody will even talk about it.
Unbelievable. I cannot
Then,
understand. How can people, I mean, what kind of people they are? Children queuing up for food, hungry children, you're killing them. This is just another level which I am not really able to understand. If,
again,
but
Israel used to transact with the European nations and not directly with US. As European alliance became weaker, they started just going through a single bully. When you go through a single bully, you can get away with this kind of a thing. And the rest of the alliances, because they are relatively weaker, they have, they just kind of either tag along or the response is lukewarm. Nations like Sweden and other nations have done, they
right.
have taken moral stands, but nothing beyond that. Then if you
At,
look at his history
see,
of
they put
withdrawal
up a
from the JP,
uh, Sabahat Sabat, at least they maintained a facade of some, moral standing over the past
exactly.
3, 4 decades. Now even that is gone, and it looks very different now. And
I absolutely agree with you.
with that mask taken off, you think it will be easier for countries like Pakistan and other countries of our size and stature in the world? Will it be easy for us to have any long-term understanding with the United States, especially under the current administration? Well, we don't know who we are talking to because we have one tweet from the president and the secretary of state and the government refuses to own it next day. No, we don't know if it's even if it is official because next day it can change. Next hour it can change.
Exactly. So that erosion of credibility at a state level, I think there is no way that anybody can make a long term. And the reason I'm quoting these incidents is that these are states who've done fundamental, they made some decisions, and now they stand exposed and vulnerable to their own populations because they must have proceeded under the Abraham Accord in good faith. And whatever happened subsequently, and the unilateralism of both Israel and US in this particular case it has created that it has eroded that platform from where they could sit and start negotiating with the Arabs. Arab nations now, and I will quote, among Arab nations, the credibility of America has gone down by 25% just in these 4 months. So, all of these states, my prediction is going forward, every state will now be pursuing sovereignty and security unilaterally because we don't see any credible superpower negotiating or standing on principle. Nobody's
But,
standing on
but
principle
we
anymore.
still
These have
see
now been
the
on.
Arab nations, we still have the evidence that the Arab monarchies, they are clinging on to the United States for their
So maybe
own
we're all
survival.
buying time. So maybe we're all buying time. Look, I cannot, this is, the classic example, even in Islamic history. You don't have to go on a head-on collision path until you have created that credible deterrence to be able to take a principled stand. So if you notice the flurry of activity between the Middle Eastern states, in particular Saudi Arabia, with China and with Russia, I think that it will have long-term ramifications, but you don't pick a fight when you're not ready. Even under Islamic principle, we did 2 migrations. The Prophet ﷺ did 2 migrations and the sulhs until you're ready to take on. So I don't blame them. We are not ready today. And the previous world order has eroded. So every state is now for themselves. Nobody can rely on alliances anymore. Nobody can rely on the goodwill for the so-called beacon of democracy and freedom anymore. There is no freedom of, there is no beacon of freedom anymore. So people have to go slow. You cannot hastily go into decisions that may undermine your very security or undermine the foundation on which you could in future take a stand on principle. So I don't blame them. I mean, the way, coming back to our original thought pattern, the way America withdrew from the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, how can any nation, Iran or anybody else, ever enter into a deal with them? Trump exited in May 2018, and he cited arbitrarily flaws, lack of coverage of missiles and proxies, and blah blah blah. He did the same thing again. His,
Yeah. Can the
his
Europeans trust them? Can even
one
the
person
Europeans
says that
trust
IAEA has not presented any credible evidence. Then under that, when they withdrew from that deal, Iran restarted uranium enrichment. At that time, it was at 3.67%. And now it's at 60% purity. By 2023, it was to 2023, and they're making that progress. And I would say that that enrichment exercise was directly a result of Trump's lack of predictability and unilaterally just withdrawing, citing very nebulous reasons for withdrawing from them. The Biden administration just failed to revive the deal fully. And by 2025, at least they claimed that they were weeks away before this conflict from breakout capability. Then you look at how he went ahead and assassinated Qasem Soleimani. That is something that is deeply etched in the psychology of Iranian lawmakers and decision makers.
Yeah.
That I would say that was unprecedented strike on a
Yes.
state actor
Never,
without
states never
declaration of
behave
war.
like that. Cabals do.
They have never been able to regain the confidence of the Iranians, and they will never regain the confidence of anybody else in the world unless we do some strategic realignment today, which I don't see happening. It triggered at that time an Iranian missile attack, which was a watered down one, but at least it was there. And they exhibited restraint because using the same doctrine, you have to be at that threshold of safety before you strike, unless you're struck upon. In this particular case, now that they retaliated, it was because they were struck upon. And even today, Soleimani's martyrdom is institutionalized in the Iranian narrative, and it is used to justify the expanded role of the regional militias. Whatever proxies they see is a result of their own actions. Then, just to continue in the list of things that created this situation that we have today, I'm trying to link his previous term with this term. And in this term, we're, just barely out of 100 days, and
Has
there
gone.
is so much chaos.
Yes,
The
so much.
US withdrew from northern Syria in 2019,
Hmm.
which greenlighted the Turkish invasion against the US allied Kurdish forces. The Syrian Democratic Forces were hugely betrayed. And it drew global condemnation. I'm not the only person saying it. If you read
Yes.
any
Well,
narratives, there is not a single narrative. By 2025, the Kurdish militias returned to Russia and Assad's regime for survival. And how they created a power vacuum. Again, they shoot from the hip, and the power vacuums that they leave behind, whether that is exit from Afghanistan, whether that is fall of the Assad regime, you create a chaos, which is creating this mindset in the state of in the mind of every Arab state now, or for that region, even Pakistan. All of us now have to work for our own sovereignty and not rely on anybody. Then at that time, you also did this
so
recognition of
in this kind of
Jerusalem and Golan Heights.
yeah, one thing I would like to take up here.
He upends,
Okay.
he upended decades of US neutrality. Even now, when he went to Middle East, that continues. He made a deal with the Houthis without taking Israel into confidence, he started dealing with Hamas, getting his own American hostages released without consulting allies. This is, it has triggered this, what you started out by asking, that has it eroded American power? Yes, it has. Your power is not just capability to deliver on short-term things. Your power is on your capability to credibly negotiate and broker. We cannot negotiate or broker because we cannot stand by our own deals. He triggered
I think
Palestinian
foundations for
withdrawal
this
from
kind of
Israel.
attitude about cyber, I think the foundations were laid in 1991 after the collapse of the USSR, because at that time I remember an American diplomat and a professor in Qaid Azam University at that time, Dennis Kirks, I think that was his name, Professor Dennis Kirks, and he delivered a lecture in the American Center, Lahore, where it was a surprise for us the way he said, oh, no, Pakistan is no more important for the United States. And they left all the mess in Afghanistan for us to deal with. And then they well-known history it is, which Christine Fair has been trying to
So we are
contest
all
in
familiar
her.
with that.
Yes.
So in the so to add to what you said about Soviet Union, to the credit of Soviet Union and China, through continuity of strategic and economic policies, they have resurged as powers. So while 1991 is in living memory of both you and I, and within our lifetimes, it has fallen down and it has stood up again as a very strong, credible force. But that we can come back to later. Just to continue, what are the consequences for the US in credibility? Number one, all our allies are in anxiety. The Gulf states are rushing towards strategic autonomy. Saudi China joint naval drills were undertaken in 2024. UAE has a technological alignment with Huawei. Iraq continues diplomatic balancing with Iran and China. Turkey expands BRICS and aligns with Russian-Iranian bloc on Syria. China and Russia have stepped in to fill the vacuum very credibly. China brokered the Irani-Saudi normalization in 2023. Russia entrenched itself in Syria, Libya, Africa. US has remained absent during the Sudanese crisis in 2024. They were nowhere there.
Mm.
The data point, Chinese BRI investment in Middle East topped 300 billion. 300 billion is a huge number, sir, by mid-2025. We just hit the 2025. I'm giving data which is maybe 2 months old. Look at the Chinese investment in Middle East. It is unprecedented. The devaluation of American commitments, the Trump shock has made allies question US consistency. And while this program is on Middle East, one has to reflect on what is happening to allies across the border in Canada, in Mexico, in Europe. So this Trump shock is shaking American diplomacy and credibility at its core. The Pew 2024 it indicated that confidence in American leadership in Arab world is now below 30%. A new poll is being taken, and I think whatever has happened in 2025 would have eroded it almost. And I would hate to conjecture, but being involved in businesses in Middle East, the word on the street is that it should be maybe even below 50% now. Biden's attempts to repair were without passion, without any results. And the new Trump presidency has maybe undermined it for decades.
Yeah.
America is
it's
militarily
not a
present.
very pretty picture for the Americans in the Middle East,
It is
especially.
not a very pretty picture for the Americans.
Yes.
We are militarily present
Even
and
I
we
was
want to
there.
assert. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are
Even in
militarily
Taiwan.
present, but we are strategically absent. Being
That's true.
absent strategically is a horrible thing because tactics won't get us anywhere. The CENTCOM maintains 45,000 plus troops, and yet US appears to be reactive, not proactive. We have lost credibility in Palestine. We have, this ceasefire that has been announced, it is on such weak legs between Iran and America, and yet the incursions and the attacks on Gaza continue. What kind of a ceasefire is this?
Yes.
So
So
I
there's several
absolutely
questions,
agree with
pending
you.
questions, looming questions.
So,
Yes, it
so
leaves many questions behind. I
yeah,
think we should stop here, but we have very important and interesting questions arising from this discussion, which we can take up in our next sessions, if you like. But most fundamental of those questions is uh, the future alliances. Are they also going to be as transactional as the US has propagated, as the US has tried to teach the world that countries have only transactional relations, they only have interests, they don't have shared ideologies, they don't have shared cultures, they don't have shared geographies, histories, etc. These things do not matter at all. This is what the United States of America has taught the world. Is that really true? That is what we are going to discuss in our next talk. Thank you very much for watching. Khuda Hafiz in Pakistan.